Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave. This is the first of two special editions. I'm doing the two Works albums by ELP. Works 1 today. It's a controversial album. Is it controversial? It's controversial. I think that's the best way to describe it. I will say, as I did with Tales from Topographic Oceans, it's valid, it's allowed, it's good music. And before you are quick to judge, stop and think. Because, what's the alternative? Here you've got an era where bands were free to do what they liked and people bought the music they liked. There was a broad range of music to buy, that sold a lot, and the industry was growing, etc, etc. And, it became an industry where that critical decision about, I like this, I don't like this, we had a business, an industry which attempted to make that decision for us, to prevent us from making that decision and tell us, these are the hits today, these are the things you must be listening to. And the outcome of that is not great music. The outcome of that is a bunch of hits which don't actually sell that much and no one seems to like. So what's the alternative? Or you have bands almost destroying their muses, burning themselves out to do something completely different, completely over the top. Is that what art's about? So yeah, after the gargantuan tour of Brain Salad Surgery, they took a bit of a hiatus. I wonder if Armaturtigun had come to them in 1975, I don't know whether they had the contractual rights to do that, but if Armaturtigun had come to them in 1975 and said, make an album of short songs, as he did in 78, maybe things would have been different, but as it was, this is what happened. They went away to make some solo albums, lots of stuff. Keith Emerson started writing his piano concerto. He recorded Honky Tonk Train Blues, which apparently was in the charts as a single, which of course he got to perform with Oscar Peterson on his TV show, which is worth a look. If you want to see Keith Emerson nervous, watch the video of that. There was a fire at his house and a lot of the manuscripts and the recordings were almost destroyed, and he managed to save some of it. We don't quite know how much of it he saved, how much it was lost, maybe. And the third movement, the piano concerto, was kind of inspired by the fire and things going wrong and why it's so good. Obviously Greg Lake had a big hit with the Christmas song, which has gone on to be a famous song. And at some point, unfortunately, for tax reasons, they had to go and record in Switzerland. Before you judge them like, I don't know, Gary Barlow or one of those people, this isn't people paying 50% of their tax or 40% of their tax. This is people paying 90% of their tax, which is a different argument altogether. Let's be serious about this. Obviously George Harrison sung about 95%, 1 for you, 19 for me. By this time it had changed, so you had 2 for you, 18 for me. So it still wasn't reasonable, but they had to gather and got the drugs shipped in. Sadly, it was around this time that Emerson particularly discovered cocaine. I believe the others did as well. Whether that in the long term destroyed his muse is the question. Similar thing happened with Jimmy Page, so you could suggest that. We don't really know. There's lots of reasons why that could have happened. But obviously the big point about this and the big thing they did was, let's use an orchestra. Let's tour with an orchestra. And it's interesting actually that although accepted wisdom is that obviously it was Emerson's thing and therefore his idea, in Emerson's biography he does suggest that actually Greg Lake originally suggested it. Whether he's just winding him up or what, I'm not quite sure whether we're meant to take that seriously, but obviously it was Emerson's thing. And obviously touring with an orchestra, your own orchestra, is not going to be profitable. It's a very difficult thing to do. ELO Part 2 did the same thing and that was disastrous as well. Obviously there were other reasons for that. The answer is actually you used local orchestra. So if you're playing Madison Square Gardens, you use a New York orchestra, don't you? And I would imagine that way it would have been financially much more sound. But as it was, they were paying all these people to tour with them and had a chef and a ridiculous entourage touring it. It got completely out of hand. But it was all about touring this album, the orchestral album. And it's a double. The idea is you've got one side for each band member and one side of ELP. Controversial. Obviously, in a sense, isn't that disappointing when you get one side of an ELP album in one sense? It seems like a strange thing to do, seeing as Pink Floyd did it, and whilst I'm very much of the opinion that the individual members of ELP are much more capable of making a whole side of music, there is no way that Nick Mason should have been given half a side of anything, to be honest. So it seems a strange idea after Ummagurumma was seen as a flawed album that they would try a similar thing. I wonder perhaps if a better album would have been made out of a single record. I also think perhaps they made the wrong selections of the material they had, but I'll probably talk about that next week. The previous time Keith Emerson tried with an orchestra, perhaps surprisingly, he's all the way back in the Nice with Five Bridges, the Five Bridges suite. And it's interesting reading about that what he'd written and what he heard played by the orchestra seemed so different. He was just horrified. It just sounded like music. And I think Five Bridges is alright, it's not amazing. It's not as good as this stuff. But he was not impressed. But then while he's hearing this and thinking, oh God, it just sounds like music. Looks around, Lee Jackson is crying. The music's so beautiful. That's quite funny. But so here he's going back to do that again, actually. I think much more successfully. The other big thing, I suppose, is new technology in the form of the Yamaha GX1, I think it was called, which is basically a modern day keyboard, which has aged worse than when he was using the Moog, because the Moog sounds otherworldly and weird because it's this sort of strange analogue thing. The Yamaha is a modern keyboard and sounds it just sounds more wimpy than a Moog has this imposing sound. The Yamaha thing doesn't have that sound, but obviously he's trying new technology. You try new technology, that's what you do. I'll say at this point, to me, Greg Lake had changed during that hiatus. Whether it was I Believe in Father Christmas, I don't know. He went from writing these wonderful folk songs to these really, really light songs, and obviously it's much more evident on Love Beach. It's almost music, Sorry, whatever had changed he'd grown up. This doesn't have the energy of those earlier songs. Having said that, obviously change is good. A lot of the criticism that is levelled at this is because it's different. It's supposed to be progressive. They're supposed to be finding new things, and obviously they don't want to just make the same music over and over again. And they've achieved something with Brain Salad Surgery. If they'd made Brain Salad Surgery 2, it would have been disappointment. So they're trying different things, and they're pushing in lots of different directions. It's very diverse. If you listen to all the material from this period, it's ever so diverse, which is a good thing. It's good they're trying different stuff. You could argue so much of the mythology around this album is because of the time it was released, what it did to their image. It's like they went away as this experimental electronic music at the cutting edge of music and came back, and what they did was something much more conservative and much more like old musicians playing different things, very talented, and so it gave rise to the wrong kind of criticism, I think, which of course didn't really mean anything. It couldn't really be levelled at Brain Salad Surgery, so that obviously helped those that wanted to criticise them, I suppose. But now that is irrelevant. Only the music matters now. That's in the past. It's the 1970s. Who cares about that? This is an album. You can listen to this album. It lives forever. It's brilliant. So the first side and the first track is Keith Emerson's Piano Concerto No. 1. There's a bit of a history about the recording of it. He went to Kingsway Hall in London, which apparently had no recording facilities. I don't know, why would you go to London to record if there's not even recording facilities? So he had to use a mobile truck outside. Whether it had to be the rolling truck stones, I don't know. And basically he had the stereotypical problem with arsey musicians, basically, who obviously didn't want to reduce themselves to playing a rock musician's concerto. And maybe the fact that it was a real concerto and not just some rock music riled them even more. And apparently it was particularly the brass players were very, very difficult. It's always brass players. And always these things, it's always the brass players. What is it about brass players? Which supposedly cost him £8,000 at this point. So he cancelled the sessions and said, well, this is a waste of time, I'm not doing this. He had this 10-foot Borsendorfer that was at the venue and apparently just didn't sound right, didn't sound as good as it should do. But he was persuaded back, went to a different place. ICT Studios in Wembley, the head of the manager of the orchestra sort of placated him and persuaded him to come back and gave him a discount, and he sort of handpicked the best players, and I imagine probably gave him a massive telling off, which seems to be a common theme with orchestras playing with rock bands in the 70s. And he shipped in his own Steinway this time, his own 9-foot piano, to play this, and it does sound fantastic, so I think he made the right decision. But he comes in and he does it, and suddenly the orchestra are really into it, and they do the third movement in one take, which is good. He goes up to hear it, listen to it, and then he gets a standing ovation from the orchestra, which is possibly a bit patronising if the attitude has changed so much just because they've been told to do it. But then they went on to record a Badens Bolero, so there is a studio version of a Badens Bolero with an orchestra. Apparently it took 52 takes. I don't think that's ever been released. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know if I can get that from somewhere. And this was also the recording of Maple Leaf Rag as well. 3 movements. First movement is Allegro Giojoso. I don't know what Giojoso is, don't ask me that. Allegro I can deal with, Giojoso. Really cool meandering theme, really good. Second movement, it's the stately one, obviously it's the middle movement. But when I say stately, like a stately home, it's proud and British. You've got the big sweeping strings, and it's unashamedly proud. Very Rick Wakeman, interestingly, I think. But with a very typical Emerson piano solo in the middle. However, the next movement is not very Rick Wakeman. So the third movement, Toccata Con Fuoco, recorded in one take. Intense stuff. It never passes the boundary of being classical orchestral music, so it doesn't really become rock. It doesn't have the intensity of rock. And whether that was through fear or whether it was just what he's feeling at the time, I don't know. However, there is an energy in that third movement which is fantastic. Supposedly reflected from these experiences with his house burning down and all this. It is really good piano concerto, but it is just a piano concerto, if you see what I mean. So maybe it shouldn't have been on an ELP album. It should have been on a solo album. And again, it attracted the wrong type of criticism, expecting too much of the audience, ELP audience maybe. So track 2 is the second side, the second record, which is the Greg Lake side. And we have 5 songs. The first song, Lend Me Your Love Tonight. Of course, co-written with Peter Sinfield. I didn't actually mention him on Brain Salad Surgery, so it's kind of unfair that when I'm mentioning him on Works and not Brain Salad Surgery when he came in. But obviously, I think they're co-writing the lyrics. I don't think Peter Sinfield is writing the lyrics completely. I think there was a time issue for Lake about writing the lyrics on the earlier albums, and it became a thing, I think, which is one of the reasons why they brought him in. But obviously all their famous lyrics, all their lyrics that are famous for being good, are co-written with Peter Sinfield, so you know. But yeah, this one, it's so meh. Definitely wouldn't have made it onto a single album. Would be fine on a Greg Lake solo album, but not fine on an ELP album. So that begs the question: what is this? This is a Greg Lake solo album in a sense, and it's his solo side. Should they have done that? Track 3, second song on the second side, C'est la vie. One of the best things on here in terms of songs. It's such a stereotype, in a way. Romantic European style, but you can't help but like that. It is a brilliant song. It's really good. Never played again after '78, I think. And it was a hit single as well. You know, it's really good. But buried in the miasma of all these songs, you would miss it almost. Then you got Hallowed Be Thy Name, not the Iron Maiden song. It's pretty forgettable, really. There's some cool evil strings at the end and stuff. Track 5, Nobody Loves You Like I Do. Pretty forgettable blues by numbers track. Again, it would have been alright on a solo album, etc. Closer to Believing is a bit more famous, and this is pretty good, and this is very much in that typical style of the time, like Watching Over You. It's very light, very soft, but it's good and it fits. It does fit on the album, and if that comes before the Enemy God, that works really well, because of course we change records and we have Carl Palmer's side, and the first track on Carl Palmer's side is the Enemy God Dances with the Evil Spirits, which is Prokofiev. I didn't know Prokofiev. I actually thought it was ELP for quite a few years, actually. Only about 10 years ago I found out it was actually Prokofiev, even though it says Prokofiev there. So it was a short, but one of the best things on the album, I think. It's typical ELP, like Knife Edge and Tank and the heavy riff stuff. Inspired choice there. I mean, whereas, you know, when they did Romeo and Juliet, that was a bit too obvious. This is just perfect for the band. It's brilliant. But like I said, too short. Because track 2 is LA Nights. Meh. It's alright. And again, you know, 3, New Orleans. Like a blues thing. Very meh. And even the drumming is so basic. And you got 2-part Invention in D minor, which is some Bach. You know, marimba style. It's a bit zappery, but it's Bach. It's alright. Again. Food for Your Soul, really sort of 70s sounding, heavy horns and all that stuff. Brilliant. And of the original stuff on this side, that's the best one. But it doesn't compare to Enemy God, and it doesn't compare to the next track, which is Tank. Great decision to include Tank because it works fantastically well with an orchestra. So did Knife Edge, actually. So, you know, which leaves the final side of the actual ELP tracks. There's only 2 of them. One is Fanfare for the Common Man. One of their most famous pieces, obviously. People would recognise it even if they didn't know ELP, I think. One of their simplest things as well. Supposedly it was sent to Aaron Copland's estate, his people, who rejected it out of hand. But they only sent the edit, which was actually what I assume what became the single, where before the middle bit, the dun 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 bit comes in, and apparently the response was, well, it just sounds the same. You just gone bong bong, you know. But then they contacted him directly and sent him the full piece, and he was like, brilliant, excellent. So he allowed it, and it went on to be such a big track. Obviously live, it ended up being a sort of medley of that and America and of Blue Rondo La Turque. Track 8, okay, is Pirates. This is the biggie. This is obviously the one they put the most work into. It started out that Emerson was a big fan of Dogs of War, the book, and they were making a film of it, and at one point he was going to be doing the soundtrack. So he was writing stuff for the soundtrack of Dogs of War, which is about mercenaries. I think either Sinfield or Lake, or both of them, said they weren't that comfortable writing stuff about mercenaries because it's morally questionable and it's not really very exciting, it's just grim. So they suggested Pirates, which is obviously a brilliant idea, and they did this huge amount of research, and the joke goes obviously that they went to Disneyland but also did some serious research as well about real pirates to get the lyrics really good. This suggests where ELP could have gone. I mean, a lot of these two works albums do that, and it's a shame that in a way they stopped, because they didn't stop. There are more albums, but after that they went into a sort of self-parody, but a self-parody of as if they were a much lighter normal rock band. And maybe financially, had it been different, this is maybe the direction they could have gone in. It's a lot of work, obviously, creating this kind of thing. I mean, if you compare this to Carnival 9, it's a very different piece. It's nowhere near as good as Carnival 9 or Tarkus, but it is substantially different. It's much more convoluted. There's some very sudden time changes, which get a bit of getting used to. I don't think it's lazy writing. I think it's just the way it's written. So it's quite a complex piece. A great vocal performance from Greg Lake. I think melodically they've matured, and it just doesn't have the tunefulness until you really get to know it, and it's much less accessible. Whereas Tarkus has some fantastic tunes, particularly the vocal bits and things like that maybe Pirates doesn't have, and maybe they would never have brought along the mass audience that they had with this kind of stuff anyway. But I think I wish they had. So yeah, really good. Definitely recommended. It is allowed. You are allowed to have it. No one can stop you from having it. Maybe a single album of Syllavi, Close to Believing, Enemy God, Food for Your Soul, and then the other side, Fanfare for the Common Man and Pirates, would have been a fantastic single album. But that would have just been an album. It would have just been the next album. They had to make some grandiose statement, because that's what that's what ELP was about. So it's good that they did it. It's good. So see you next time for Volume 2.